Hello everybody. So lovely to see you all. So I wanted to kind of revisit some brainwashing with you all. I was trying to find I've got a red square, so if signals poo, let me know. It shouldn't be. So I want to kind of first talk about what it means to be human first, and then I want to kind of revisit brainwashing and kids brainwashing. I hadn't realised the video I'd done was an hour and a half, well, an hour and 15 minutes, but it's really important that we kind of really understand the dangers of kids and what they've kind of done to kids. So this is my notes. If you're wondering what this is, this is while I was doing my journaling this morning. Because we did a video on Ukraine and Russia last week. And I've been slowly catching up with Tori's show that she did, I think I'm still on like the 7th. But one of the things she was talking about was the colour revolution in kids. And that kind of reminded me of when we did the whole show on China and Mao, and I was trying to find the same video with regarding to what they actually managed to get the kids to do, but I couldn't, but that's okay because I can remember. So I think we're going to visit that, and I'm going to help to try and really help you guys understand how it was really easy. So a lot of the times we see young kids being crazy and you know, insane liberal lefties and all of that stuff. It's very choppy, isn't it? I can see me pausing quite a lot. This is really annoying. It's probably because I'm talking about stuff they don't want me to talk about. Hopefully it will sort itself out, and that was just a blip. We'll see. Hopefully it's a blip. Oh, it's not even connected me to Twitter. Maybe I've been banned from Twitter. Who knows? So, hello. First things first. Humans, right? One of the things that drives me crackers, so this kind of came up in my call. Okay, it looks like it's more stable, so I'm just going to wait to see. Let me go and share it. Right, hello. So hopefully it's more stable. So I think there was just issues between OBS and Restream, which is annoying because it's a lot easier for me to kind of flick between videos, not having videos, but it is what it is. So I'll start again for those of you who potentially couldn't hear before or are just joining for the first time. So thank you for joining, everybody. It is the 9th of March 2022. We're going to talk about being human. We're going to talk about brainwashing, and we're going to talk about kids, specifically brainwashing kids, because I think we often forget how long this plan's been in place. And, you know, we look at the if you're wandering around now, there will be 2 select groups who probably still clutching to the COVID narrative and most likely having meltdowns over the Ukraine narrative. And when you understand how they kind of manipulated those 2 generations, it makes sense. But the most dangerous generation facing us are the millennials. Oh, is it not working at all now? Oh no. Oh man. Oh, let me put the chat on the screen because then everybody else can see what's going on. So is it not working at all now? It says it's really good here. It says I've got 1010. It's probably because I'm going to be sharing and restreaming one of the very first videos that YouTube deleted of mine. Okay, so Vicky's here. Let me just quickly put me on. It might be you might have to jump somewhere else. It's not letting me go on. It's not letting me go onto Twitter at all. That's been blocked for some reason. Oh yeah, it says I'm offline. Okay, good. Okay. Well, it says I'm offline on Twitch. What's going on with that? Or maybe is that the fake me channel? Oh yeah. Okay, that's fine. Oh. Okay. Woo! So we are here. So I want to talk about being human, kids, colour revolution, and we're going to understand why we are where we are. Awesome, thanks, Vicky. Understand why we are and how we ended up where we are, and thinking to the future. So we have got lots of work to do, but I want to kind of share as much of my knowledge with you guys with regards to humans and how humans work, because the people who are this is my list of what we're going to talk about. Once we kind of come through this curve, right, we're riding the wave, and once we get over the peak and the cabals, people are being arrested and all that, so it will happen. It will happen. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take like a while, but we have to start thinking about what does society look like, and how do we enable everybody has an opportunity to live freely, and how do we do that? And the only way we can make sure that we do that in a way that is happy and healthy is by really understanding a key issue that people aren't really covering. Like, we're not really talking about how we can support the younger generation to kind of come back to being and understanding who they are and what it means to be human, because that's the key thing, right? Because they are the people who are going to be working and paying to and looking after us. So it's all well and good. It's all well and good saying that there are people who are gone and they're just they can't ever be fixed, right? So roughly 2 to 6% of people who are caught up in the narrative are lost, right? Lost forever. And so the ex-KGB defector said, we use these extremists to make our get our demands met and all of those things, but then we round them up, we put them in camps, and we slaughter them because they can't ever be fixed. So I want you to then consider that it's the young generation who have been so molded by the cabal that if you just round everybody up and stick them in a FEMA camp and then slaughter them all, that means at some point our generation are all going to be old. And there's going to be like this, there will be a huge gap, right? There'll be a huge gap. We're already facing potential population catastrophe with not having enough people, because the cabal's doing really, really well with killing people, that we're about to experience not enough children being born to sustain the population. And I'm not for the depopulation agenda, so I would quite like people to start having kids, right? I want to be looked after when I'm old. So I want to call a few things out. So firstly, one of the things that really drives me crackers is the idea of labeling people, right? So everybody wants to know, am I an introvert or an extrovert? Am I male, female, all the other different freaking names that we have right now, because everybody's so confused. That's to do with identity confusion, right? So we seek to understand ourselves. We want to know who we are. We want to know what all of those things. We need to understand ourselves, and that's a really important part of healing. It's an important part of moving forward. The problem is we look to others to decide who we are rather than looking inside ourselves, and the problem with that is they're not us. So there's an analogy that I use to try and help my clients understand that understand labels and how dangerous they are. So one of the most powerful things about twin studies that people often overlook is the fact that a lot of twin studies, when it comes to psychology, they always they end up showing that it's unique, but we're unique. So when it comes to mental illness, there's no mental illness has ever been there's been no causal link between genes and mental illness. So there's like correlations between, lower magnesium, but is that you have to think about that as the whole chicken and egg scenario. Do you have depression and therefore you have low magnesium, or do you have low magnesium which is causing your depression? So which came first, right? So so far there has been no genetic causal link for mental health difficulties. Now when you're talking about autism, ADHD and dyslexia, dyscalculia, things like that, like literally those things which are neurodevelopmental, is the brain's wired slightly differently. But still, we don't know why that happens. I mean, I have my suspicions with regards to what they're trying to jab into everybody's arm at the moment. I have suspicions about why brains are being wired differently. However, it's not being confirmed, right? But just the sheer number of individuals who've got different brain wiring. That's not just autism, ADHD and dyslexia, dyscalculia, because it's all the same part of the brain. So even that's not genetically linked. There's been no genetic definitive reason why that happens. So we go on the assumption that genetically, bar somebody with Downs, because they have like an extra chromosome, other than somebody with Downs syndrome, everybody else is the same, right? We have the exact same coding, but we are unique in ourselves. So even with an identical twins who have got the same coding, different fingerprints, same coding, if they, always together, you'd expect them to develop the same, have the same interests, have the same, just be the same personality, same interests, same tone of voice, same inflection, all of these things. If they are actually a carbon copy, then that would be true. But that never happens. It never happens. They will develop their own personalities, even if they're identical twins. So I want you to consider how a teeny tiny life event can actually alter the person that they become, so you become. So you have two twins, right? And they're about 3 years old. And it's first, like, dad's being overzealous and he's trying to teach them to catch a ball, right? Because, mums tend to be like, I'm not throwing balls in the house. So we're going to pick on dads, right? Throwing balls. And the first child that the ball's thrown to catches the ball. And so that child is thinking, oh my God, I'm a catcher, I'm a winner, I'm amazing, I'm so proud of myself, dad's celebrating, you're getting loads of feedback, feeling really awesome, the kid feels awesome. And so that's a teeny tiny part of its identity. It's now a catcher, right? It's a can do, it's a win, I can try, I can do all of these things. All these amazing things are attached to this one teeny tiny event. So dad, being all super enthusiastic, throws the ball for the second child, and the second child doesn't catch it. And that child then internalizes, I'm not as good as the other one. I'm not a catcher. I can't do these things. I can't win. I'm a failure. I'm a loser. I've let my mum and dad down. All of these things start happening. And I know that is quite a lot of cognitive thought processes for the 3-year-old child. You have to bear with me. But I want you to consider that one teeny tiny event could potentially alter those two children's trajectory. So where they started kind of growing the same, all of a sudden they're growing like this and becoming two very completely different people with different life experiences. That one event, it's not a major emotional turbulent event. That was just like, did you catch the ball or not catch the ball, right? And so we go throughout our lives with these belief systems that we have created, some because of others, some because of our life experiences, our mistakes, some because it's societal beliefs or moral codes, and we kind of with this eclectic mix of everything that we learn. But no two people are the same. The same as no two snowflakes are the same. So when we have labels and we say, you're male or you're female, What happens is my male and my female are very different to somebody else's idea of male and female. So then we don't alter that label to fit somebody else's narrative, we just are. So lots of females are different, lots of males are different. When it comes to mental illness, you know, I talk quite a lot about people with autism. No worries, thank you for joining. We talk about, you know, somebody has autism. Most individuals in society have a really narrow understanding of what autism means, right? So they may have met one person who's got autism, or maybe they've seen a documentary on it, which also they tend to be very narrow. So then somebody else says they've got autism, and instantly people get confused because this other person's not presenting in the same way. So as soon as we stick a label on it, we all of a sudden lose that person's individuality. We stop looking at that person as a person, and we start identifying them with this preconceived notion about what we think that thing means. And then when they don't kind of stand up to that, it causes all types of havoc, right? Havoc. But I want you to kind of just hold on to that entire twin narrative when you're having conversations with people, even if they've grown up in the same ages, if they're the same age as you, went to the same school as you, had a similar sort of background, they will see the world very differently because they see it based on all of their life experiences. Now, the other problem, and I kind of call out fake science quite a lot because it drives me fucking batty. Absolutely batty, right? Is that when it comes to people, there can never be any causal links proven, ever, because every person is different. A bar Down syndrome and chromosomes, right? Okay, so that is a causal link. That's a genetically viable causal link. But anything else, nothing can be 100% because people are so different. So when something's tested, so, you know, genetically, if it's tested in vitro, so it's tested in like a Petri dish, and you can be like right down to the microscopic cellular level, we can say like that causes that 100%. But then you can put it into a human and you not get the result you were expected. So why does that happen? Well, because we are an eclectic mix of everything that we've experienced in our lives, and that actually does dictate on a fundamental level with regards to how our cells act, react, and interact. So one of the conversations I had this morning on my call was we were talking about sleep. And one of my clients was like, oh, I read a study the other day and they were saying that you need more sunlight and that will help you sleep, which is interesting because science on sleep is actually when you have sunlight stroke blue light, which is like a lot of technology. Older technology was all blue light. If you have like blue light, sunlight, blue light, it inhibits, so it stops melatonin production. Yeah, melatonin is sleep, and that's what you need in your system to go to sleep. And so whoever did that study is lying, and I'll tell you why they're lying. One, because of the whole melatonin thing. Two, because there is no way to isolate the sun from everything else that happens when you're outside, right? So if I stand outside, I am in if I stood outside right now, I would be drawing in the Earth's magnetic field. If I'm living in an area which has got really fresh air, that will make it different with my body. If I'm an emotionally healthy and stable individual, I am going to be able to utilize all of the stuff from the outside, the fresh air, the Earth's magnetic field, all of those things, and that is going to supercharge my cells, right? But if somebody's got a lot of emotional turbulence and they're outside, they could be getting the exact same experience as me, but they don't get the same results. And if you've only just looked at, you can't say the only reason that person went to sleep is because we had them outside in the sunlight, because you can't isolate the sunlight from everything else that's going on outside. So so you can say correlational, right? Correlation means like these kind of two things happened at the same time, but we can't control that. But you can never control people, ever. And you can never control nature. So any causal science, which is people and nature, I would be very careful about kind of going all in. So someone suggested MCT organic oil for autism. It doesn't rewire your brain, right? Like somebody who has autism, it drives me, makes me angry, very angry. As somebody who has an atypical brain, which basically means it's not typically wired. So atypical brain is a neurodevelopmental disorder, which is autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia. So your brain's quite literally wired differently to varying degrees. So how do I so the way that I describe it, I want you to think about your brain, right? It's like this giant mass of information. And in order for you to kind of get that information out, it goes through a funnel system. So you all kind of know what a funnel is like. It goes like that, and then it's like teeny tiny, right? So an average person's brain, so a typical person's brain, is the funnel system is really useful. It's got like a big fat bit, and it kind of goes, you get bits of information out in a logical, useful order. Somebody who has autism or autistic spectrum disorder or autism spectrum condition, whatever you want to label it as, because there was a label change in 2014, their funnel bit is very, 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 very narrow. The only one piece of sensory information can come through at once, and to varying degrees, right? So somebody who it ticks all of the boxes, teeny tiny narrow funnel, and somebody who's kind of just tipping over into clinically diagnostic, they're maybe they can get a couple of bits of sensory information through at the same time before it's kind of overwhelming and overloading. So I want you to really kind of understand what that means by. So right now I'm looking at myself while talking, while moving my hands so I can feel things. So all of this is coming through at the same time, and my brain can decide which is the most important, and it will tune in and tune out and tune in and tune out, even though it's all happening at the same time. Somebody who is very like way over on the scale, autistic spectrum condition over here, has to self-manage and isolate different they have to decide what is the most important on a conscious level, and then tune into that while tuning out to other things. So most often somebody who is struggling will close their eyes, and if you're trying to talk to them, they will shut their eyes and turn their head. They want to listen to what you're saying and not be distracted by the words that, by your lips moving. So you will often find me shutting my eyes to try and pay attention to what's going on. So I have never been diagnosed with autism. I'm not saying I have autism, but autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, it's all the same part of the brain that's wired differently. So you usually get like quite a lot of crossover and quite a lot of comorbidity, which comorbidity simply means multiple mental health difficulties at the same time. So you get a lot of autism and ADHD, a lot of autism and dyslexia, dyscalculia, you get all of them together in a big jumbled mess. So if somebody who's like this way on the spectrum with autism is in an environment where there's too much sensory information going on and they can't filter things out, then they just, will have a meltdown, will kind of implode, because they just can't shut things out enough to calm down and focus and figure out what's going on. So, which is why, ear defenders and those things are really helpful, because it enables them to just focus on the thing that they need to focus on while there's more stuff going on. So we've got like autistic spectrum condition over there, like teeny tiny filter. Then we've got typically developing brains, which is where the filter's working, right? Then we have on this side somebody who has got dyslexia and dyscalculia. So dyscalculia is number version of dyslexia, and it's now being labelled as specific learning difficulty, which basically means if you've got average intelligence, so 100 on the intelligence scale in either reading, writing, or arithmetic, mathematics, your scores are way below what they should be expected just in that. So everything else has to be kind of like here, and that needs to be like really low. So it has to be a specific learning difficulty. So you can be like, top set for all of the language-based subjects, so English and history and all of the kind of writing subjects, and all of a sudden you're just like bottom set for maths. Like there's no kind of, it is not to do with intelligence or to do with access to education. It is because your brain's wired differently in encoding and understanding that piece of information. So it's a huge difference. So when we're over on this side of the scale, I say we have a filter. And it's got a big fucking fat funnel, right? It's a giant funnel. So you get so you're just processing so much information at the exact same time. So for those of you who've kind of known me for a while, you probably have noticed that my brain makes very interesting leaps and jumps and bounces around a lot, from places where you're sat there thinking, how did she even remember that? Where did that come from? Never even saw that. Like, how the hell did that join together? But now she said it, it really makes sense. So I wasn't aware that my brain was different until I was working in a specialist autism unit. I was working on, and I'm really blessed with all of the experiences I've had in my life, even the potentially not so great ones. I say potentially, and I will come back to that in a second. And it was only when I was leaving, the clinical psychologist who was training me said that she was going to miss my brain. So this was in 2014, and I was just like, I mean, it's just like the same as anyone else's. It was the first time somebody said to me, no, your brain works like in ways that I've never experienced. She said, I will come to you with a question. And she's like the world's leading child feeding expert. So she's like literally the world leading child. She said, I will come to you with something. And instantly you have this response out of nowhere, which is like way out of left field. Nobody's even considered. She said, I've never met anybody whose brain works like you. And I was just like, interesting. I thought everybody's brain worked like me. And they doesn't. Okay. So I have dyscalculia. So I have like maths issues, serious number issues. So I want you to kind of think of it like that. So when we go back to will essential oils help with autism? It can potentially support the cells, right? So any kind of essential oil, they work on a cellular level. So if you are struggling with sensory overload as an adult or child with autism, and that's causing your physiological anxiety-based reaction, you can use essential oils to calm the autonomic nervous system, but you can't do it to affect autism. Like you just are. Like you are built the way you're built. And while you can develop coping mechanisms, while you can rewire your brain, if it's fundamentally built in a way, it will still work in that way. What do I mean by rewire it? So there's lots of children who've had, there was the young Noah Wall who was born with only 3% brain mass, and his brain continued to develop outside of the womb, or people who've had like serious traumatic head injury and they wake up and they can't speak because that part of the brain's injured, and their brain will wire a different way. However, it's not fundamentally altering the way in which it's wired, it's just finding a new path. So when we talk about developing new pathways because of injury or rewiring, it's not a structural change in the way that it functions, it's just a slight deviation. So imagine you're in a car and you're driving along a road and all of a sudden there's a freaking sinkhole, right? You can't drive through that, but you could turn around, you could go back to the previous roundabout and you can come around again. That's what happens when you rewire things. So if you struggled with anxiety, depression, or any kind of like long-term mental health issue, which isn't a neurodevelopmental, everything can be, you can find another way back round. So what happens with PTSD, anxiety and depression, they are, when you look at through brain scans, is actually you've got really solid and strong like neural connections from the back of your brain to your frontal lobe. And so I always tell my clients, you're just like chopping through it. We're going to take a little penknife to those big oaks, and we're going to plant some seeds. So all you're doing is severing those connections and getting your brain to function in a way which is more beneficial. So it's quite a lot of work goes on in your brain. But in a fundamental level, you still have either a giant funnel with specific learning difficulty, or you have a normal sized funnel, or you have a teeny tiny funnel. So that's kind of like the best way to understand how the brains are wired differently. And so it also helps when you get the cross, if you've got a child with autism who also has a specific learning difficulty, they've got like teeny tiny funnel, but they've got shitloads of information trying to get through at exactly the same time, because they also have this other bit of, it can get really messy. So the other thing when it comes to autism, in reality, the only way you can tell whether it's actually autism and not a learned behavior, because people say autism runs in families, but it can be a learned behavior rather than it's actually that individual having it, is if you get them get them in a machine, right? And we don't do that. Most labels are given subjectively. So I will sit in a room, I will do some tests, and I will give my subjective opinion based on my understandings of the world, my belief system, how I see the world, and how I'm interpreting that person, rather than any actual real, we can just scan them and figure it out. We don't. So anything that's causal, which is people and nature, you can't guarantee that they've isolated everything. You can't. And you haven't done an entire history to figure out whether they caught the ball or they didn't catch the ball, and therefore have built a completely different system of beliefs. So belief systems are really important, because what we believe is possible about the world is the reality we create. And I know, so this is where, we get like, oh my God, it's woo-woo. It's not. Quantum physics. Okay. So actually quantum physics and the woo-woo world, even though they don't talk to each other, they're actually saying the same things. So because I believe, I haven't got any water. I should water up with me. So I believe the water contained in this glass. I believe there's water in this glass. No, I've just found some crazy. So I believe the water in this glass, if I drink it, it's going to heal me. Right? Placebo belief. So we are using and taking something which has no medical reason for having a positive reaction. This water is just water. So holy water is water that's blessed and that's loved. I'm going to drink it. It's going to love my cells and I'm going to be amazing. Or I can have a nocebo belief, which means like, I think this water is poisoned. It's not, but I think it is. So I drink it. I understand how that poison manifests. I manifest that in my own body, right? So we've got those two kind of beliefs. So the kid who caught the ball, they have like placebo beliefs. They believe they can do anything and do everything. They're off that way. The kid who didn't catch the ball has got a nocebo belief. He's got a belief that's gonna cause him harm. So the way that we see the world, the way that I believe the world is, feeds into the way that I act, which feeds into the results that I see. and feeds into the way that I feel about the world. So your results, your actions, and your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions, they're all kind of interlinked. If I feel good, I take good actions, I have good thoughts. If I have good thoughts, I take good actions, and I feel good. If I feel good, if I take a good action, I feel good. So it's three. All three work together. Negative actions and reactions are important, really important, because it's only in those negative interactions stroke reactions to the world do we then change. So at some point, a nocebo belief that we have about the world or what's going on will kind of like slam us in the face, right? And then at that point, we have an opportunity to change the belief or do something different. A lot of the time we don't. We stay stuck in a loop. We stay stuck in the same cycle over and over and over again until it is the thing that's causing us havoc is so overwhelming. We take those steps to change. So for me personally, throughout of my first 24 years of life, I experienced like verbal abuse. I mean, my experiences with my peers, I mean, family was a bit so-so, but with my because, you know, families, so families are normal, right? But with my peers, I had really bad interactions. So like verbal abuse, physical abuse, there was sexual abuse, it was just not fun, like at all, whether I was at school. And the only reason I got through school was because I knew it was going to end. And then I went into workplaces and that same cycle continued. And so that's how I ended up at 24 on a motorway, attempting to end my life. But I was unsuccessful. I was unsuccessful not because I didn't try, but by divine intervention. And I got stuck between two lorries, and it just, I made a contract with Big G, who I didn't believe in at that time, but I just kind of was really angry and I shouted at him. But when I made that decision, and the decision I made was that nobody else was ever going to dictate the way that I feel. That was the decision I made. In that moment, that same cycle that I'd experienced for 24 years, regardless of like where I lived in the country, because I was, you know, in the RAF. I wasn't. My dad was. So we moved around a lot in the country, regardless of whether it was primary, secondary, college, whether it was in a workplace, if it was like, it didn't matter where I was. Those same things happened over and over again. The minute I made that contract and changed my belief, it never happened again, right? That's all that happened. I shifted the way that I was now deciding to show up in the world. And my entire world changed. So right now, we're going through the master harvest, right? Which is the world is going through a terraforming from 3D into 4D. This is happening. And in order for everybody to be harvested, we have to have negative catalysts. So we have to have an individual negative catalyst to wake us up, right? But because we're going through a worldwide awakening, there has to be a hell of a lot of shitstorm happening at the same time. Like, everybody has to wake up. Everybody does. Whether they wake up at the beginning of the war, middle of the war, once the war's over, and they get, you know, they're forced to see what they just didn't wake up. At some point, everybody has to wake. And when you look back at history, we are experiencing the same cycle over and over and over and over and over again. You know, we call it like they're repeating the same playbook. You know, they have a pandemic, there's a terrorist threat, we all have to, like, they are pushing for this one world government, but it goes way further back than that. It's the same cycles, and each time enough people wake up and they kind of shove it down. Enough people wake up and they shove it down. But because on an individual level, so if you go back to the individual, I make one decision about me, I can change my future. Me knowing all this shit's happening, I can't alter the Earth's future on my own. So we keep going through the same cycle until we ended up at this breaking point. Like, this is the actual giant negative catalyst that has to happen in order for the world shift to happen. So we have our own individual negative catalyst to wake us up, but the world needs a negative catalyst, and everybody has to be woken. So when we see all of this, like, you just like, how are these people so asleep, which is why we're going to talk about how they brainwashed kids, and all of us for forever. And those who woke first, as in awoke first, I have a very strong belief based on the people I know, so it's only a small perception, but what I noticed is the people who were awake to the bullshit also correlated with the individuals who were awake in their own lives because of a negative catalyst, or repeated events of negative catalyst came to a head, and at some point we made a decision to completely shift our lives and be like, that shit's not happening to me, right? It's not happening to me. I have to sort myself out. And you become you become the ball catcher. You shift from the person who dropped the ball into the ball catcher. And that then you start deciding how you're going to live. So I want you to kind of think of everybody else. They're the people who are living in this kind of world that they can't do anything about anything. Why even look? I can't catch the ball. I'm not even going to try. Right? So they might be aware that the ball exists. They've seen other people catch the ball, but they're just going to kind of like mill around by themselves, right? But this has been forced on them because nobody said to them, but if you drop the ball the first time, you can always try again, right? And not everybody catches it on the first time. Just some people are lucky, right? There's all those different reasons, but it's people who have chosen to wake up because of the negative catalyst, who are the people who are like leading the charge. So what that really means, is the people who are still asleep, their negative catalyst hasn't happened yet. Even with all of the shit that's already out there, everything we're already experiencing, they still haven't it still isn't bad enough to snap them out of their daydream. And so I've been saying for a while, it's going to get even worse. It has to get worse because it has to be a monumental shift. So the soft disclosure, so it doesn't necessarily mean it. I mean, it will get worse because food shortages, they're coming. They've been coming. Cyber attacks, it's been coming. Like, those things that happen. But even the soft disclosures count. When they start talking about all the horrific things, like when it's no longer hushed up and people are forced to see it, that will shock a hell of a lot of people. So there was an article one of you lovely lot shared the other day about a nurse who was saying, I can't believe I was lied to. I had all these jabs, blah, 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 blah. So my very unsympathetic response to whoever shared it, I didn't share it on, was she wasn't lied to. Medical professionals have a responsibility. And actually, if it was a UK medical professional, it's part of their contract, that they are up to date on information. Because we have informed consent, the only way that they can actually support a member of the public to have informed consent is if they understand the things. So they have the skills, they have the knowledge, they have the understanding of medical jargon to actually go and look. Like there was lots of members of the public who upskilled their medical knowledge in order to interpret science and stuff that they had no, I mean, including me, like CRISPR, gene therapy, all of that shit. I had no idea about any of that, or didn't understand it onto a fundamental biological level, and now I do because I had to. They had those skills and chose not to look. It's going to come bite them in the ass, okay? So what we're kind of seeing like Ukraine craziness at the moment. And when we look at all of the kind of craziness, so BLM, Antifa, all of that, the crazy liberals who can't get a parking space and they scream and they just just raging against the world, just insanely raging against the world. I mean, as an awoke individual, we look at this and we just think, what the hell? Like, how did you get there? Like, what's going on? And so hopefully, this is when I had longer hair and maybe another stone attached to me. Are they frozen? It was just like, wow, yeah, it was porky. I was very ill and then recovered. And I'm getting back to not being ill. Okay. But so what we know, developmental psychology, is that if you are going to brainwash and take control, so I want you to think about grooming. If I'm going to groom a child, because I'm a sexual predator, right? Be careful how that's clipped. If somebody wants to, he just admitted he's a sexual predator. No, if I was going to, then the what I would need to do is make sure that I have a relationship with that child before age 7. So after age 7 is the filter comes down. So our brains work very differently. So when we're very young, we're just taking all the information. We're just like, everything's coming at us and we freaking love it and we're fearless. And then as we start to get a little bit older, we get a bit manipulative. We're testing out morals and lying, and we're kind of coming into our own, and the veil goes down, and all of a sudden we have to be a teenager and we're like, what the fuck? But so about 7 and 8, that veil starts to come down. We start to interpret the world slightly differently. We start to step away from our parents being the gospel, and our friends are more important, and we start to shift. So in order for me to manipulate a child, I have to make sure I do that while the adult is the most important person, right? So while the child believes adults above their friends and above everybody else. And in order to do it most successfully, you want to start the relationship at around between 6 months and 3 years old. Okay, so why 6 months and 3 years old? Because that's when a child starts to understand and build trust. And I do go through the developmental stages in the video, so I don't want to go into it too much, but I want you to kind of hold on to that. So between 6 months and 3 years old is where children start to wire trust and love. And so if you confuse that and manipulate that development and the way that that's kind of being embedded, is you have pretty much got that child for life. I say for life. What actually happens is when we is what they believed, right? So when this is where all the MK Ultra programming, all of that experimentation, is they fine-tuned it. So I'm a developmental psychologist at heart. So my perception of psychology will be very different to other psychologists, right? So I'm a the developmental side of it makes the most sense. And we can see it repeatedly in how things play out. And if it's used appropriately, is you can fix so much shit. The majority of developmental psychology came out of, and I think this will come out into the world at some point, came out of a lot of the horrific experiments that they were doing on children, right? So the conditioning, understanding, operant conditioning, and all Pavlov's dogs, he tortured his dogs. He tortured them. He didn't just ring a bell. He never used a bell, ever. That was never, even if you actually go and look at the research, he never used a bell, ever. But he actually tortured his dogs, and then he developed like a less torturous version of events that was kind of submitted and went around the world. But the reason why we know what we know about supporting children through difficult periods of development is because they were horrifically experimenting on children. So there's a very famous psychologist who experimented. So Albert is the child that was experimented on. And he taught Albert to be extremely fearful of this loud noise, right? That was his own son. He terrorized his child because they wanted to know, right? What would happen if I just did this? That was his own son. People don't talk about that, but Albert was his own son. So they were just not good people. So between 3 and 6 months, so 6 months and 3 years is where you really want to start building that relationship, confusing and blurring the lines between what love is, what, trust, because after about 3, between 2 and 3, kids, they get terrible twos, they start standing up for themselves, you start to lose the opportunity. So if you manipulate a child enough, you can get them to do horrific things, right? Horrific things. And so when we watched the Mao videos, we did that kind of China Day. One of the things that shocked me, I don't know why it shocked me, but it did. And I say I don't know why because I heard it and I was shocked and I was like, I get it and it makes sense, but just hearing it out loud shocked me, was when they were talking about the children in the classrooms as young as 12 who were beating their teachers to death because they didn't follow, they were against the CCP, right? This is like Mao's colour revolution. So we're going to talk about colour revolutions, kind of what's been going on in Ukraine for the last 8 years or so. When you look at Ukraine, it's not far enough back in time to really understand the power. That was the first time. Like, it was Mao who did it first. And that's the extreme that they believe these 12-year-old children fundamentally believe that's exactly what they needed to do. And so if you look at 12-year-olds now, they are, the ones who aren't confused by what gender they're supposed to be, it is the big push for the youth at the moment is climate change, right? They've been hammering that into children, that they're all going to, that the older generation have destroyed the world. And a lot of teachers tend to be young teachers. So like millennials, there's a lot of millennials who are the teachers. So they can be like, my mom's generation, so your grandparents. So it's not them, it's them and us. And that's also a very important psychological concept, us and them, which is what the media does a lot, right? So I'm an anti-vaxxer, us and them. Labeling, separating people out. They define a label and then they give somebody a label. So the children have the potential to cause catastrophic harm, even to people they love. They're the people. And so what the schools were getting children to do was tell on their parents who were not wearing masks. That was literally part of the, it was in the UK schools guide. You have to start getting kids to call the anti-terrorism hotline about your mum who isn't wearing a mask. And the kids would do that because they're terrified and they're fearful. And one of you lovelies mentioned that a 5-year-old your 5-year-old grandkid came out of school saying, I stand with Ukraine. 5-year-old, right? Manipulation. And a 5-year-old is going to believe the teacher because parents are working. So you just want you to kind of hold that in mind, that, you know, Mao's colour revolution proved that 12-year-olds would beat an adult to death because they believed it was right. Hopefully, so I can't remember. I mean, I did this video maybe 2 years ago, or over 2 years ago. No, back end of 2020. So I'm not sure what I do and don't go into. So if you want to grab popcorn, so I grabbed the video. I will be on the chat. I will try not to interject. If I do, I will wait for previous version of me to finish and move on to the next bit, because chances are I will interject and then I will say the same thing, right? But I'm not going to promise anything. I do talk a lot. So hopefully this is going to work. So this is why I wanted it on OBS, because it's a lot easier to kind of swap screens. What app is this? So what am I using to stream through? Is that what you mean? I'm using Restream. Right, Brave tab, share audio. Yes, yeah, Restream. My pleasure. Okay, so I can mute me and then I can go get a bit of water as well. So this is the, oh, can I share this first? Hold on, sorry. Let me share this. Anybody who has to go, wants to go, or wants to use this afterwards. So this was the third brainwashing video. I did 3. But this is the one that specifically talks about children, because it's important that we understand just how much they fucked with the kids, right? So I'm going to move me. Oh, look, there's my signal's gone. Huh. Move me and then turn me on. Hello, and hello again for those of you who randomly joined me this morning. I hope you. I'm not looking quite so bedraggled as my emergency stressed out random call. So just want to say hello to D Live for my first ever live stream over on D Live. For those of you who are joining for the first time, my name is Katie Woodland. I'm a maverick psychologist, business coach, TEDx speaker, and best-selling author, but I have kind of put lots of things on hold to support the whole digital soldiers army and help get information out there. So each video is kind of covering something specific, and I wanted to go into today the woke legacy. Now it's really interesting just how much we've been manipulated, and obviously there are the 3 brainwashing videos as well. So there's already the 3 like targeted brainwashing videos, but this is kind of more subtle. And for those of you who are sending me messages, just so you know, social media platforms are not letting me see your messages. Occasionally I see them coming through from Periscope, but if you're joining me on Facebook, I can't see it. If you're joining me on YouTube, I can't see it. They disabled my live chat. Actually, YouTube have disabled my live chat. So do leave me a comment, do leave me a message, and I go round social media afterwards to say hello. But for those of you who have been leaving me messages, I'm sorry I missed them, but I do go back around and check them. But so this is kind of more of a covert brain and behavior manipulation that's been happening behind the scenes. And so just to give you a bit of background, I've already been quite outspoken with regards to young people being transgender. Hello, I can see Blippi Blue from Tampa, Florida. Thank you. So I've already been quite outspoken about trans young people deciding their gender. And what I'm going to, and I know that poor J.K. Rowling got a huge swathe of just crap for her opinion. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you why I have been getting increasingly annoyed with the psychological community, because they are being negligent in allowing this to get to where it is. So for many years I've been kind of against what's been happening, and spoken quite frequently about it. And I was going to share with you one of my radio interviews where I was on the radio with BBC Shropshire a few years ago, saying that what was happening in schools was children were being taught that the children were being taught that the person in authority tells them, and they just believe it. However, my computer has still got to go for a repair. We're still on the laptop, and I know that the sound is terrible. So I'm going to write myself a note, and I will share the link with you all. BBC Radio, if it's not come down, I don't know, they were blocking on my website the other day. So if you find all this useful, please do make sure you share it, because nobody's seeing it because social media hate me, but I'm still here, so that's okay. I'm still here. And before we move on, just quickly, I want to say thank you to all of the digital soldiers, all of the Q people, who Tucker calls them. I love Tucker. All of the Q people who have been working behind the scenes, sharing information, and who have just been strangleholded. We are all grateful to all of the work you've done, and I would never have had my eyes open if you guys hadn't have put your reputations on the line. So thank you for leading the way, and I hope that we can all of the little anons can kind of do you justice, and help support and share the message that you started putting out there. So again, we've got a Google Drive, and now if you click the Google Drive, you go to everything I've compiled. Somebody asked me about the mind map the other day. I stopped using it because people couldn't access it, but actually it's been scrubbed. So, and I don't know whether it's just been scrubbed from me to access it, but there was a full mind map with loads of information, and all that information has now been lost. Thanks, internet. So I don't know if you guys can open it. Do let me know. But I've not linked it onto this one. It's one of the earlier videos, but I can't even open it or access it, and it was my mind map. So I'm gonna dig into that as much as possible, because I want to get it all transferred over. But yeah, if you can open it, do let me know, because as far as I'm aware, it's been scrubbed from the internet. Who knows? Okay, so when you hit the Google Drive, let's do some show and tell. So when you hit the Google Drive, you get all of the stuff with the last few videos. The ones that are here, you'll see like Ebola patent, coronavirus patent. This is a really important, this is the audio version of a 3-hour Illuminati documentary. Well, it's a secret recording where they're talking about their plans. It's really powerful to watch. Now, I took out the what did I do? I took out the audio, and I was listening it in my ears as a podcast, but there is a video version as well. But each of these little folders should align up with one of the videos. So this is kind of the way I'm doing it. Now, inside the folders is you also get lots of other information that I've compiled and collected to get you started. Now, today I haven't got that. You've literally just got a few things that are my things, simply because that's what I'm focusing on, but it will give you enough information to benchmark. So this is me talking about the things that I do for a living. So I haven't had to go across the internet. These are actually like things that people, this 17-page document you get, my clients get. So I'm giving you guys that because that's going to be important. So everything else is compiled as a starting point. So do remember, I try to give you a broad bit of information as a starting point, and then you can go off and do your own journey. Anybody who talks about QAnon being a cult just doesn't understand. It's not about that. It's about you finding information, you sharing information, and allowing other people to figure out what they believe, what they don't believe. So we're going to go into those. Ooh, there we go. We're going to go into things. We're going to go into some more psychological theory that has been around for some of them have been around for almost 150 years, okay? And these were gold standard theories. They still are gold standard theories, but they've been warped, ignored, and sent to the bottom of the pile as the woke have kind of made stuff up. So you've probably heard of a few of them, but you probably don't really understand it and haven't thought about it in the way of why it matters to what they're doing. So before we dive in, so we're going to start with understanding parenting styles. Now, even if you're not a parent and if you've got no kids, this matters. So parenting styles is simply the way in which you are treated by a caregiver. Okay, so we've got to remember that over the last 20-30 years, well, from the 1950s onwards, children were no longer being raised at home. They were, because mum and dad had to both start going to work, so we started giving children to the state to raise in about the end of the 1950s, 1960s. So they are the caregiver. We have to remember that when we talk about parenting styles, and this is one of the warps, is it's not necessarily about parenting. It's about who the behavior which is being used to support children through their developmental stages, and we're going to talk about developmental stages next. So these really, really link together. And so before I became really embraced my maverick psychology title, all the way through learning psychology and all the way through my training, I really, really aligned with heavily with developmental theory, because it makes sense to the real world. I mean, I get social psychology and all of those other things play into it, but so this is my bias, and this is important you guys understand. This is 100% my bias. My full psychological understanding and grounding was heavily entrenched in developmental theory, because it just makes sense when you know people. This is the benchmark, and I think this is why developmental psychology kind of got, I genuinely believe the reason why developmental psychology got thrown to the bottom of the pile is because then people would figure out what was going on. This is why this is really important. So parenting styles is what it's called, actually applies to anyone who's a caregiver. So your grandparents, but obviously most importantly it's the state. The state are the caregivers for most of our children. So over here in the UK, you get free childcare up to so many hours at a certain age, to encourage mums to get out of the home and go back to work. Like, that's the huge thing. That's why you get free childcare. It's because they want your child. So remember that the state needs control. The earlier somebody influences a child, the more embedded they'll be. And pre the Conservative government, so there used to be something called Sure Start, which was the Labour kind of set it up, and it was Sure Start, and that's where you used to take your children. So this isn't just a Conservative thing. This is why you guys need to get out of the left right. The baddies are working together, and the left right stuff is just it's fallacy. It's not true. It's good and bad. So the bad people want your kids for lots of nefarious reasons, but obviously because the whole plan was to get to them where we are today, and everybody's being controlled and everybody's brainwashed. But the key thing to remember is that Labour had Sure Start, the Conservatives shut that down, and then they started giving nurseries the power. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Genuinely the same thing. Sure Start. So for the last 25 years, the state has been raising our children. So when you hold that in mind with what we're about to talk about, that helps you understand why so many young people genuinely believe the world is going to explode in 2 years unless we stop climate change. Genuinely believe right now they're all going to die of COVID, even though they're in the 99.9% recovery if they even get it in the first place, like if they show any symptoms. Genuinely believe that adults have destroyed the earth considering we've been looking after it quite a lot. And now when I was at school, they tried to tell us the earth was imploding, but we had enough. It was too early. It was too early when I was at school. And it just kind of didn't stick. So they had to kind of go back to the drawing board, and they tried again. So when you think of Greta Thunberg, she may be autistic. I don't know whether she is or she isn't. And there's an autistic floating around. I haven't looked into her, so I'm not going to say one way or the other. But regardless of that, she's a 16-year-old child who has been indoctrinated by her parents and the state that the world is going to explode. So no wonder she's kind of obsessed with this thing. Like, why would you get up? Why would you get up in the morning and go to school if you think, what's the point? Like, I mean, I wouldn't. I know it's not true, so that's why I'd quite like to stay in bed. Anyway, so I'm going to turn my diffuser off as well, just in case that's interfering. Sorry, guys. So parenting styles came out in the 1960s, and there's 4 different parenting styles, 3 of which will cause your child harm. Now, actually, I wrote an article for the Huffington. So I used to be a Huffington Post contributor. I don't think I am anymore, and I'm not sure whether they've scrubbed me or not. But there's quite a few parenting articles on Huffington Post. If you do Huffington Post and Katie Woodland, I don't know. When I tried to search for me the other day, I can't find anything. So that talks about parenting styles as well. So there's 4, 3 of which are gonna cause your children harm. Like, this is just, there's no ifs, no buts. That's a given. There's only one which is beneficial, and that's this one, authoritative parenting. Now, we have to be really, really careful about fake science. So this was set in the 1960s. It was tested over and over and over again. Loads of different countries, loads of different people tested it, and it became the standard. In the last 10 to 15 years, there's now a 3 parenting style, there's a 5 parenting style, there's a 7 parenting style, where people have had to kind of stamp their name on it. Ignore those. They are warped. They are, it just go to, yes, there is, sometimes you learn more. Sometimes you do learn more. But when it comes to understanding human behavior, early, by the 80s, we really understood it. Now, for those of you who've kind of been on the QAnon journey for a little while, you will understand what I'm about to say next. The reason why I say by the 1980s we really understood it is because of Operation Paperclip. As you'll see in a minute, some of these behavioural studies were happening around the time of the World War II. And they were highly unethical in the way that they tested these things. So if you are now going to take a study based on, and this is not me saying we need to be unethical in the way that we understand human behavior, but in order for developmental psychology and behavioral psychology to come about, they would torture individuals, they would do horrific things to people to understand how to manipulate them. Okay, so anybody who's doing it in an ethical sense is not activating the true fear, the true automatic fear response, which we don't want them to. That's, I mean, other than that's what the government is doing right now. I'm not saying that's what we go out and do, but just be mindful. The ethical standards we have today were not around. They weren't around. The original behavioral studies, if you want to dig in and you want to find out more, if you look at the MK Ultra stuff and what they do to force dissociative identity disorder, what they were doing as part of that study, all of that will have been catalogued and perfected over time, right? Perfected over time. Also, legitimately, out of all of that became a lot of this information. So what they're saying, because they had to share it. So this is the thing, they have to share it as wide as they can so that they can share it with other buddies across the world. I can tell you that when I twigged that the way that I help people heal is based on human torture, I literally, I threw up in my mouth and I couldn't function for a good 48 hours. I couldn't. And then I had to kind of reset myself, because actually I'm helping people heal from the stuff they've done. But just understand, the new stuff is just people making a name for themselves. So there's four, only four. So authoritative parenting is how you want to be, okay? So the first type of parenting style, caregiver style, it is really, really bad, is authoritarian and disciplinarian. So this is communist state. That's what this is. This is you cannot do anything unless you are told. You have no freedoms, no rights, no free will. You are exactly what we tell you you are, and you can shut up and put up. Okay. Now, this leads to rebellion. Always leads to rebellion. Always. For a very long time, it will kind of completely destroy the child, like no self-belief, no self-worth, all of those things. They often will struggle to develop what's known as an internal locus control, which is like you having control of your own actions. So you have an external locus of control, i.e. you can't think. So if you look at groups like Antifa, and you start thinking, well, how on earth do they think these things? Well, it's because that's what they've been told over and over and over and over and over and over again. Like, they've never been taught to think. If you haven't been taught critical thinking skills, you then don't have them. But so authoritarian or disciplinarian parenting is just, and I've put here, like, kind of think, seen and not heard, very Victorian, ruled with an iron fist. But if you look at all of the communist regimes, eventually people will just rebel, and it ends up in civil war if you're going to apply it to general population. Okay, so that's kind of coming, and this is what we'll be going through the minds of the generations who believe the adults are just terrible human beings, is the reason why they are so happy to fight and to kill and all of those things, is because they feel like they have to, like they genuinely feel like they have to. I mean, they're all brainwashed is a nice way to say it, but they have been created into be mind numbing action takers with no thought. Like, they just don't have a clue, and it's heartbreaking. So the next bad one is, and this is not in order, this is just alphabetical, so don't think one's worse than the other. All three are terrible. Well, okay, so one is worse technically, but they all end up badly, bar the one. That makes sense. So permissive or indulgent parenting. So this is when you just give kids free rein. And this is what has been happening in so many families. Okay, so this is being loving and nurturing, but never disciplining, never telling children what they are, never, i.e. you're a girl or you're a boy, never telling children anything, and allowing a child to make its own decisions. Children can't make own decisions unless they have been taught critical thinking skills, which only come from understanding reality. You have to know what is a girl and what is a boy to then decide whether you are a girl or a boy. And when it comes to gender, you'll see in a minute, when it comes to gender, it used to be diagnosed as body dysmorphia and gender dysmorphia. So it used to be recognized as a mental illness, because how can you say you are not that gender when you've never been another gender? So I can't say I don't feel like a girl because I've never been a boy.
Does that kind of make sense? But we'll get to that in a second. But this is the damage of the last 20 years. This is the woke. So we had the authoritarian, we had all of that other stuff, and then now we've just gone, everybody can do whatever they want. You can be whatever age you want as part of age fluidity. That's not true. You are your chronological age, and you may have a developmental age, a social age, or a behavioural age, but you are. I mean, I don't. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and be a 6-year-old boy. That's just not true. And when you don't have real things to base your reality on, you only ever have a warped perception of the world. And when you have a warped perception of the world, you are mentally unwell. Like that's the fact. If you have a warped perception of reality, you are mentally unstable. And that doesn't mean necessarily, you know, sorry, that's the postie. My dog's going nuts. It doesn't mean you are broken forever. It doesn't mean anything like that. But it just means in that if you have a warped perception, then you aren't well. So the problem is that they never learn to respect authority, never learn to listen to outside forces, especially outside forces which have a different opinion. So again, you think back to Antifa, and I'm just going to use Antifa because that's the only kind of one that's in my head right now. But if you think to all of them, like they cannot understand a different point of view. You know, you can show them evidence, and they tell you it's a con and it's a lie, right? This type of parenting breeds psychopaths, narcissists, identity confusion is down there, oppositional defiance disorder, conduct disorder. So this is criminality. This is what it breeds. It breeds criminality because at no point somebody said no. It's really that's what this one ends up a lot like. And then with the last bad one is uninvolved or neglectful parenting. Now, this is just like no love, no kindness, no discipline, no nothing. The child just doesn't exist in their eyes. And kids tend to, so they will have really excessive behaviours very, very early on. So, you know, you get kids that are climbing the walls just for a bit of attention because they don't get it, which is very different to children and teenagers and young adults who are happy to go out there, cause riots, murder people, and not thinking anything of anybody can go out there and murder somebody and have no emotional attachment to that event, has no empathy, which is a psychopath. It gets really messy. I don't want to get too messy for you, but just understand, like they haven't had those opportunities to develop those skills because we haven't looked after the children when we needed to. But so neglectful parenting is just like right off, right? Now, schools do this as well when so if your parents are neglecting you and if you go to school and you're expelled, then you go somewhere else to find love and attention. And again, so you often, you know, you may get kids going to gangs. So all of these have unintended negative consequences, and there is a lot of crossover with where you end up. It's not a written rule that if you're neglected you will end up in a gang, but just collectively that's where those three kind of trajectory wise. So it's cool. We do that. I think there's something stuck in my jumper. So it's risk factors and probable outcomes, but just so you're aware of those. So the where we want to be is authoritative. Okay, so that is nurturing, supporting and loving and disciplining. Most importantly, there's a clear defined set of rules. Expectations are there, i.e. we expect our children to do the best they can and actually do the best they can, but not get upset if they're not amazing. But consequences are always clear, concise and applied to the entire family unit, so in a school, across the board and balanced fairly, i.e. not one child gets singled out for doing bad things and other children get let off. And that's what happens in school all the time. So what happens in homes quite a lot as well. But in schools, there will be certain children that teachers don't like, that they pick on. I was picked on by lots of teachers, so I know that. So it happens. And when I say picked on, I mean like some of it was, you know, real abuse. So some teachers just do, and it's not all teachers, it's not all parents, it's not all teachers, but we've got to remember that the government, the state, are the people who created the curriculum. So even if you're a really, really good teacher, some of the ways that you've been teaching, and I regularly have arguments with teachers about some of the teaching methods, they are not based in psychological understanding of how children think and learn. They're just not, really not. It's just complete bullshit. I.e. learning styles has never been proven as a psychological theory, ever. That's a story for another day. Anyway, so you're honest, you're loving, and you're appropriate, and appropriateness is important. Again, so you get some teachers who will behave like they're friends of the pupils, and that can lead to highly inappropriate behaviours. But you know, teachers are the authority figure and should be treated with respect, but they should also teach the young people and children respect based on their age. We've got, like, if you do that, I mean, it's not hard to do this when you understand how. It really isn't hard. And I've been banging on for years, this is what we should be teaching in school. We should be teaching young people how to raise happy adults. That's what a child is. A child eventually will be an adult. You have to raise happy adults. That's what you're trying to do. You're stopping them from harming themselves enough that you can shove them outside of the home. But also, we should be taught how to look after ourselves. Like this, a huge generation need to learn both, and every other generation just need to learn how to look after children. So remember, the school system changed. We stopped teaching people how to look after children. We forced them out of the home, and then the state took control. Do you see how we've been manipulated? And I know it's the same across lots of Western societies. That's the manipulation. It's taken decades, because you know, this is a centuries old plan. You know, they weren't in any rush. We were. So that's the important thing with regards to who is looking after the children. And we were all children once upon a time ago. So there's more information in there about operant conditioning and classical conditioning. And those two conditioning theories are early 1900s, based on something in the late 1800s. So this is pre, I think some of it, I'm pretty sure that Skinner, I'm going to throw this out there, and I'm hoping he's dead by now. So Skinner was 1989. No, Skinner was 1938. Sorry, just double check. 1938. We know what was going on in 1938. Is like we're getting close to the beginning of World War II, and he is talking about operant conditioning. So that's based on Thorndike's 1898, yes. And Pavlov was 1890s. So Skinner's 1938. So these guys weren't ethical in the way, and I've heard stories about what really happened with Pavlov and his dogs, and he abused his dogs to figure out whether it'd work or not, right? And then Skinner, we know that our governments were still, they're still doing it now, let's be honest, with Tetra Project and Project Pandora and COVID. It's like it's still testing on us now. We're still being tested on. But they were relentless back then, with, prisoners, with people in asylums. So they had access to people who had no no one looking out for them, people in workhouses, all of those things were happening. And yes, they were and so they would test on populations they didn't like. So, you know, there was the eugenicist movement, but also people were quite happy for Germany Nazis to take over in Germany and be against the Jewish population, and in other countries they were against other religions. So we need to get out of the obsession with just black individuals were slaves and tested on. Actually, they were testing on all of us for different things. I had a conversation with somebody earlier today, particularly when you're talking about oppression to a white British person. We have been so invaded like for thousands of years. Just let's stop the division. There are bad people and good people. All good people, regardless of age, race, gender, faith, whatever you want to do, should all be on the same side. You should be going into the things that you're going into with your eyes open. Okay. Yeah, so there's conditioning in there, and that's the way that you manipulate somebody's behavior. You reward people for doing well, and you punish them when they're not doing what you want, right? So when you look at society, you get a pay rise, you get holidays for doing well over here in the UK. In school, they started giving everybody bloody achievements. Like you get a cup for effort, whether you get an A, B, C, D, or E. You get a cup for turning up, or a that's because that's what works to get people to do what you want them to do. That's why we use reward charts when you've got unruly kids. It's important, it works, but actually they've been doing it to the entire country. Anyway, oh, sorry. So hold on to the understanding the parenting styles while we dive into developmental stages. Like, this is important. Oh, can I scroll up? Okay. So there's two little infographics. So from 0 to 1, children need to learn trust versus mistrust. So this is from Erickson's developmental stages, and this is early 60s as well. And this was the gold standard of understanding how we develop and how we age. Okay, and I learned that this is what is still taught, or was still taught, when I was at university. So there hasn't been anything that's kind of overtaken this. There's been like mild adaptations where people have like kind of juggled around with the ages and adapted things, and he's adapted it over the last, he's passed away now, but he adapted it and updated it in the early 90s, I think. But again, this is it. And when I read it out and go through it, it will make sense to you. If you've ever had kids, or you know kids, or you were a child, which I'm sure you probably were at some point, think back to what was going on in your own life experience, and you will understand why this is true, and why this is being buried, because just fucking naughty, a lot of them. Disgusting. Okay, so if we support our child successfully between those two ages, they will develop hope. Now, hope is different to faith. I love the word hope, but we have to remember, hope is not a guarantee. Hope is like, hope it's going to work out the way that I want. I'm going to keep trying and eventually it'll work out. Okay, so they have to, this is really important, that they learn to trust the caregiver will meet their needs, so that they can extrapolate that out and actually start to venture out and experience the world. So a well-rounded toddler is a freaking nightmare, because they are fully autonomous and then we rein it in. But if you don't tend to your child, i.e. when they're crying, when they need feeding, when their nappy needs changing, is they don't learn to trust that the world is safe. They don't learn to trust you, and they don't learn to trust that the world is safe. Now, most parents in the UK tend to, probably most mums in the UK do tend to be at home until they're about 1. But if you're a mum who's struggled with something like postnatal depression, or you got 3 kids under that age, or there's lots of different ways things can go a little bit awry. Just know that if you're sat there listening to this and going, oh my god, my kids are nuts, it's not a write-off. You can change it. Like, if you just start adopting the good parenting style, the authoritative parenting style, you can shift all this and you can move them through the stages. So you cannot skip a stage. You can't skip a stage, but if you've missed one, you get stuck. So you kind of get stuck there, and you will continue to chronologically age, but developmentally you're behind. So this is why people have different developmental ages, is because they got stuck at some point in development. So you just have to kind of support them back through it, and the way you do it obviously depends on their age. So that's really important. That's the first time they start to trust that the world is safe. Once they hit 2 to 3, this is where they're testing, like, I'm the king of the world. Okay, this is why if you have a toddler and you tell them no, i.e. they're opening a cupboard and you say no, and you say no, and you say no, eventually they get it for that one cupboard. Then you have to do it for every other cupboard, every other drawer, every other cushion that they throw off. Like, they learn quickly that one I'm not allowed to touch, but what about this one? What about this fire? What about running in front of this road? Like, they haven't learned, and they don't learn, and we don't learn this skill until quite a bit later, to take one thing and extrapolate it out across the rest of the things that are also similar situations. They just know this. Okay, so if you successfully support them in this area, they get free will. Okay, this is how early on the free will starts. If you don't do it right, they will not develop a really solid foundation for an internal locus of control, and instead they will have a massive over-reliance on other people to tell them what to do. Now, age 2 to 3, most children, particularly in the UK, are in schools. The school system now doesn't give children an opportunity to do this. You have to sit down, you have to listen to the teacher, you might get to run around for a little bit, but what happens between ages 2 and 3 in school doesn't really support this happening. Now, I'm sure it's age 2 where you start to get the 30 hours free, right? So if you've stayed at home for 0 to 1 and 0 to 2, by age 2, the UK government is encouraging you to give your kids up. So they trust you, but now we need to stop them from having free will. Okay, do you see why they've buried this deeply? This is how quickly.
Oh shit! It looks like so I'm just gonna see if I can pause that for 2 seconds, see whether I can get it back online. I think I've got it saved somewhere. This shouldn't be deleted. This is on a
early on.
Okay. Oh, okay. Whew. I was panicking then, saying that shouldn't be deleted off the server. Okay. Okay.
This is how quickly. This is how early on our brains start working. It's a little bit added on as well. Okay. So when we get to age 4 and 6, they start developing initiative. So they now start to understand that if I've done this in one setting, I'm allowed to do it in the other setting. And also, if I've not been allowed to do it in this setting, I'm not allowed to do it in the other setting. They also start to understand guilt. So up until this point, children don't have empathy, right? They don't have any morals. They understand that you're upset, and if they bite you, you might shout, and that will make them feel sad, but they kind of don't realize that it's their fault. And they don't really care, like, not in a bad way. So you got to remember, this is all just development. It's not that your kid hates you. They're biting because they want attention and you're paying attention to it. Sorry, my chair's squeaking again. So it's just habit. It's habit. If you allow a child to bite you, they will keep biting you if that's what you attend to. So they are hardwired. We are hardwired to survive, and they are in straight survival mode. So they're starting to feel guilty about the things that they do that upset other people. So that is triggered into our stress response. So guilt is a stress emotion. Anger is a stress emotion. Frustration is a stress emotion. All of that.
They really don't want me to play this. They really don't want me to play this.
And then you, instead of run, so you will go through it even though you don't realize it's happening. So this is the first time kids start to feel guilt. Their stress response is starting to be triggered. Up until this point, they are fearless. Kids are freaking nuts, and they're built that way so that they can survive, because they need attention. So they need to be crazy, and now they start kind of getting some kind of self-control if they're supported. Okay. 7 to 12, industry versus inferiority, and they get competence. So just want to kind of bib in here with regards to when do children develop anxiety disorders and all of those kind of mental illnesses. Technically, unless it's a neurological, a neurodevelopmental disorder, i.e. dyslexia, dyscalculia, autism or ADHD, which should be present from birth because it's the way the brain is wired. You can adapt it and move it all over the place. Like, we can rewire a brain at any point. Just know that. But anything after that doesn't really kind of kick in until the child has really turned on the stress response. So it's very unlikely for anyone to develop clinical anxiety before the age 7, because it's only just kind of started and we're all testing it. And it's also why most phobias occur around age 7, is because it's on and it's on. Now, also between ages 6 and 7 is when our brain wave states change. And if you want to know about those, that is all in the brainwave stuff done. So that's important. So up until this point, kids are just like flying around and everything's coming in your head and you're just absorbing everything. This is why they say like kids brains like sponges, is everything kind of comes in with that filter. Then we kind of slip into semi-filtered, and then we just kind of like shut everything down and we run our adult selves based on a lot of our child programming. It's really, I've got no idea how the human race has survived this long. Like it's just crazy. Okay, so 7 to 12, this is when they're kind of like, this is where they'll start to develop morality. And again, that doesn't really kick in until 9 or 10. So and I have to just say here, I don't agree with children of the age 10 being charged with murder. I do not. It does not make psychological sense at all whatsoever. It does not follow any psychological theory. A child at the age of 10, particularly a child who's been in an abusive home, because children who aren't in abusive homes don't tend to go murder people, let's be honest, they will have skipped these stages, like, or they have been badly that's not right. Kids off and throw them in prison for their entire lives. Anyway, that's another story. So they need to start learning about how they are useful, what they can do, and start owning who they are. Now, if they don't develop the competence, i.e. they're kind of good at school, they're learning spellings and doing all right, and they're building some friendships, then they will develop low self-worth, low self-esteem, and low self-love. Now, this is really important around this age, and it drives me crackers that people don't know this. Until the age of 12, we are building up all of those things, right? Then we hit the age of 12, and I say 12 is puberty. As soon as puberty hits, our physiological and chemical structure shifts. And what happens is we lose all of the confidence we had as kids. Like, this is when the brainwave patterns shift, our physiological structure shifts, also the chemicals we're running on shift. It's like you hit puberty and somebody sucks all the love and fun and excitement out of you. Like that's what happens in puberty, and your brain starts chopping bits off left, right, and center because it doesn't think you need them. Like, puberty is a huge key part of our existence, and we shove kids in a freaking box and ram shit down their throat. No wonder they're all trying to they're all confused. Anyway, so our self-worth, self-esteem, and all of that just disappears around this age anyway. We have to rebuild it. We have to go through the same process we've just done from 0 to 12. We do all the way again until we're about 25. Like, we do it twice. We do it from the perspective of our parents telling us everything, and then we do it all from the perspective of our peer group telling us everything. And then once we hit like mid to late 20s, we actually join those things together. Like, that's how we develop. And just so you know, guys, some of this is my own. I should probably write this as a theory, because some of this is my own. That's my own stuff, right? Don't steal it. You heard it first. But that's, think of it in that sense. You do it first from your parents' perspective, and then first from your and then from your societal perspective. And always hold on to, we need attention, we need to be accepted in order to survive. Like, that's we are driven to be accepted to a group. Now, if you don't get what you need from your home and you're not getting it from school, and you hit this age group, this is where you end up in places that are potentially dangerous. This is where you end up attached to fringe groups, and believing very, very scary, hairy things, is because nobody's given you free will. Nobody's enabled you to start developing critical thinking. Like, all of that never happened. And so you're not skipping developmental stages. You're just getting everything all warped, all messed up, without the foundation. You're literally building a palace on sand, like, with no foundations, and the tide's coming in. Like, it's just a big mess. So then when we hit, that was an accident. I just zoomed out. Okay, so then we go on to 13 to 19, and this is why I get angry with the Tavistock. Is they should not. It is negligent. It is psychological abuse to tell a child to pick their gender before age 19. It is torture. The Tavistock should be done for crimes against humanity. They are changing children's genders at an age where they are supposed to be building their identity, but they don't know who they are yet because they haven't explored. So you can't state at that age that you genuinely understand the implications of the choices you make. Now, I want you as an adult who's watching this, and all of my videos are only available to adults because I slip the F word out quite a lot. I want you to think as an adult, when you were a teenager and you had an argument with a friend, your whole world imploded. Right? You didn't want to go to school, you didn't want to get out of bed, everybody hates you, the world's over, what's the point in going to school? Like, that is how they think. And you are going to tell that person they can decide whether they're a girl or boy when you haven't helped them understand what girls and boys are. Right? So it doesn't matter what gender you are, you can still be a firefighter, you can still be a psychologist, you can still be a nurse. Like, that has got nothing to do with your biological makeup. It is the reason why there are so many children who've got no idea what gender they are is because we're not teaching them. Gender has nothing to do with who you are as an individual. It's just your biological. And people will say, well, that's just sex. It isn't just sex. It is who you are. This is really important. If somebody is telling you to your very core is not who you are, how the fuck is that going to end up well? Like, do you understand how psychologically damaging and then physiologically damaging that is when you go and completely destroy the way that you were built? It is truly disturbing and disgusting, and this is why I get told off. Why lots of psychologists won't talk to me, and I don't care. You are committing crimes. You are committing crimes. It is a crime to tell someone that they are not who they are. Like, okay. So this was like a long time ago. We knew this was really important stage of development. Identity. Or they get role confusion. Now, role confusion and identity is identity, like they don't know who they are, they don't know what gender they are, they don't know whether they're coming or going. And again, people will say that it's normal and it's natural to. It is normal and natural to be attracted to both genders around this age. So not saying everybody is, but that's something which happens because you don't know where you fit in, right? And this is why, for those of you who've been to university, there is such a thing as a very common phrase, which is gay until graduation, because those individuals aren't actually homosexual. They just exploring and having fun and enjoying themselves, but actually when it comes down to it, is they really like guys if they're a girl, or they're a guy and they really like girls. Like, so lots of stuff happens, right? Anyway, we as a society have forced the confusion. Like, I believe wholeheartedly you can do whatever you want with your body. You can do whatever you want with another consenting individual who's an adult. Let's be honest, it's an adult consent. Children can't consent. Do whatever you want as long as you're not harming somebody else, but not teaching children and not teaching teenagers these fundamental principles of humanity is negligent, it is torture, it is truly disgusting, and you should be extremely ashamed of yourself, and I can't wait till you get locked up. Let's just say that, right? This is what and then all of the pills they're being put on, don't get me started on pills, right? They're so dangerous. Your brain is, during puberty, your brain is supposed to be forming and you're pumping it full of freaking chemicals that are not natural chemicals. People, like over 45% of our young people today are diagnosed with clinical anxiety and depression. The only thing that's shifted is the way that we're treating our children. Like, that's it. It's the way that we are supporting them to survive. They're not born differently, it's what we are doing to them. Children grow into happy adults because they are nurtured and loved by the adults and individuals and caregivers around them. That's just how it happens. And for those of you who want to see the rest of it, we've also got you've got here we go, from, I'm not going to go through this because this isn't to, okay, so look, okay, actually I'll do this one. So this is age 20 to 34. This is intimacy versus isolation, and this is love. So this is where gay until graduation comes in perfectly. And I can guarantee you, back in the 50s and 60s, like, this is when homosexuality was still illegal. Like, people were being what was it, consensual over here until you age 21. Anyway, people were like very close to this. People were being like executed for being a homosexual, right? But this is where you start to build healthy, loving, long-lasting relationships with friends, families, and partners. And then you move on and you move on and you move on. So go and have a look at the rest of them. But for anybody who's not heard these things, oh, I've got loads of people chatting, so thank you. I'm going to go through these now. I've got, so if you've never heard those things before, I hope, will be sat there going, but that's just common sense. And it is to you. It is to you, because we had an opportunity to be taught the realities of life. Anybody who is part of the woke generation will be horrified by everything I've just said. Genuinely horrified. By the fact that I've said you can't pick your gender, by the fact that I've said you can't be age fluid, by the fact that I've said that unless you teach children, they don't survive, they don't think and learn. Like, that, what I've shown you is the truth of how we function, and the truth of how we have got to the age that we've got to with regards to thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, right? The warped woke agenda has only been rampant for the past 20-30 years. Now, I didn't learn psychology, and I didn't become a psychologist until 2014. So I get a little bit of leeway that actually, even while I was learning, even while I was at university, I wrote it. I was saying this is all freaking wrong. What we're doing now is wrong in schools. And I was a governor. So for those of you who want to know, I was a governor in a school which has got is one of the 10% most deprived areas in the UK. So really, really lots and lots of low socioeconomic opportunities. Like really, really, you know, the old school world, which you'll probably get me shot, is, you know, poor families, single parent homes, lots of bad parenting styles, not because they don't all love their kids, but just it's the cycle that they got trapped in. And that school was amazing, and the reason why that school was amazing, because the headmistress, well, it didn't used to be, and she kind of came in to fix it. She was phenomenal, and she was older, and so she grew up understanding all of this stuff, and implemented it effectively in the school. And the school was consistently, and then obviously, like, I don't know, they're having to do it now actually, but back when I was a governor, it was very unusual for a primary school to have governors in specialities of areas they need. They had a finance director, they had me as a psychologist as a governor. Like, they genuinely wanted the input from people who were not from a teaching profession to actually support the school. And so, you know, I was able to look support their SENCO to actually deliver and do psychometric assessments in the school, so they didn't have to wait on CAMS and stuff like that. So they've really upskilled all the teachers with regards to real understanding of how children think and learn. And they would consistently get their kids would get top, like they would be in the top 14 of the entire country. So this is the bottom 10% of, you know, when we talked about risk factors at the beginning, like, these are the kids that are all going to end up inside. These are the kids who've got no hope, no idea, no nothing, right? And they're all outstripping all of the kids from really, really affluent areas, because the school made up for the shortfall in supporting children to think and learn. And in fact, that school, they created the new curriculum. So the curriculum changed, they created it, embedded all of these things in it, then made a shed load of money by selling it to the entire area and the Birmingham area, because of how effective it was, right? So not everybody's bad. I want you to understand, I don't think everybody's bad. I don't think all teachers are bad, but a lot of teachers are being taught the wrong information. So hopefully if you're just joining, make sure you go back to the beginning, because I lead you through why we are where we are today. So NJ.
Okay, so I've stopped because that was just me answering the Q&As from many moons ago when I was in the basement. Okay, so hopefully that was kind of helpful. One of the key things to really understand is that they stopped teaching parents how to parent. They had to. So why did it have to wait till now, right? So if you think pre 60s and 70s, and World War, we ignore World War II because lots of things changed. But even though many mums, you know, would go to work, they would take the kids with them. So I was talking to my dad about, you know, he would go, like his mum would go fruit picking for money, right? They would go fruit picking, but the kids would come with them, and they would just kind of like leave the kids to go crazy in the mud. Or you know, kids used to be out in the streets, and like one of the mums would be kind of looking after everybody's kids. So there was kids had a lot more opportunity to kind of like just be kids, and children learn better from other children than they do learning from adults as well anyway. But so it's not that both parents didn't work, but it was just in a very different way. And then when we had the 60s, so there's a great program that I know the BBC is bad, BBC, right? But BBC Two, they did it. It's something called Something Forever, Something and Other Through Time. So they did like sewing through time. They did families through time. So they do like different households, and they actually go. They track them through the different generations, and it's a really powerful series. There's multiple series where you can actually see how the family dynamics changed, and how the education system changed, and how the working environment changed. And when you watch all of those things with understanding what we need in order to become happy, healthy humans, you can literally see the manipulation and the shift in society, purposeful shift in society, to ensure that we ended up where we are today with parents not being involved in parenting. And one of the things that really came out of the COVID lockdowns was parents actually seeing for the very first time and understanding for the very first time what was being taught in school and how their children were being taught, and recognizing that the kids aren't getting taught anything that's useful. And you may wonder, like, how does potentially a parent of a 13, 14-year-old child not realize what's going on in school? Well, if you're dropping a kid off for school, you're going to work, your kid's going to school, your kid's going to after school club, then maybe you're having dinner together, or maybe you're not actually eating, maybe you're just watching the TV together while you're eating, and then you tell the kid to go do their homework. You're not actively involved in their homework because you're working as well, because you've got extra work from home, right? And then the kid goes to bed. At what point in time are people even asking, hey, what did you learn at school today? So I have been very outspoken about particularly climate change for quite a while, and all of the crazy shit that kids are learning in school, because I used to babysit my niece and nephews quite a lot. And every time I picked them up, I did to them what my parents did to me. The first thing I ask is, what did you learn in school today? And some of the things they told me, I was just like, but I'm sure you must have misinterpreted what they're saying, because that they can't be teaching you that, because that's not true. So one of the really interesting things that I was later discovered is actually what they were taught, and not just miscommunication, was when one of my nephews were maybe 8 or 9, so about 5 years ago, was taught in school that we, the British people, bombed Germany in World War II. We bombed the civilians, and we bombed all the schools. And I'm not saying we didn't do that thing, we did, but we bombed all them, and we started the Blitz. And I was like, when he said that, I was like, oh, I think you've misunderstood. We Hitler kind of bombed us first, and we were bombing non-civilian areas, and towards the end we did bomb the civilian area. We caused catastrophic harm, right? But we were aiming, I say aiming, but we didn't start it. We didn't start it. Actually being taught that in school. So how many kids were being taught revisionist history? And so that made me have a conversation with my mum. And I was like, okay, well, what kind of things did you learn about the war? Because you're the generation above me, right? So what kind of things have they shifted? And I only asked her these kind of things once, 2020, 2021. And one of the things that I was never taught at school was that there was a concentration camp in Jersey. I wasn't taught one of the British Isles had a concentration camp on. My mum was, because they couldn't hide it from her, because it was her mum's generation that was living it. So you see how you go from they scrub one generation, scrub a little bit more, and change things. So it only takes one generation to alter history, if those generations aren't talking. And so that's why the 25-year, what's been happening in the last 25 years is so dramatic, is because they stopped those generations talking. One of the other things they did in COVID is they banned the grannies and granddads, to save granny and granddad. You can't talk to them. You can't be near them. Because granny and granddad don't necessarily have access to technology. They don't really understand it. I mean, some of them did, right? But the majority of the old people in the care home. So we have to get granny and granddad out of the home anyway. We have to manipulate them out of the home so they can't have conversations about what really happened. With better eyes than what we know from the fake history that we're taught. So you have to get granny and granddad out. You then have to get mum and dad out of the home so they can't talk to the kids. And then you have to get children from 3, below 3. You have to get the kids below 3 so that they recognize you as the caregiver, you as the person who is guiding them and responsible for teaching them everything. And when it comes to the transgender agenda, there's lots of incidents where it's the school that convinces the child that they are in the wrong body and in the wrong gender. And then in some states in the US is they have a you don't tell your parent policy, and the kids can go and have they can go and get they can go and get sex changes, and they can get medication without parents knowing, right? So the school system is fundamental in driving a lot of these changes. Yeah, absolutely damaging them from the start. So it didn't take. This is why I get really frustrated when people only look back, like maybe, Trump, like when we only look back to 2016, is you're not looking far enough back to see why it's come to the head now. And so they've tried before, the last, from all of the research I've done, I mean, they attempted 2009 with sci-fi, but actually their real last push and attempt was in the 80s. As in sorry, let me reword that. The people's real last proper opportunity to bring it all down was in the 80s, when they then flipped everything on the head and called it, satanic panic. So all of the paedophile stuff really started to come out in the 80s. And the problem, which is why the cabal was able to win, was, AIDS happened. So pandemic, distract the public, pandemic, everybody's going to die, put them in fear state. And when you're in the fear state, you're controllable because you're in survival mode. So you automatically look for somebody else. You follow the leader. So, controlled opposition. They have caused. The blood is on all of their hands, right? So you create fear. We go into an automatic survival state, and so freeze, run away if we can, or fight because we have to. Like, that's the last step. So usually we go into fear and we just freeze. Most people don't know what to do. They don't know how to solve the problem. And if they've never been taught critical thinking skills, they definitely don't know how to solve the problem. So if you put somebody in fear state and then you offer them the solution, and somebody's going to lead you out of this, you just follow the leader. Like, oh, okay, I just, like, they seem to know what they're doing. Let's just go. It makes sense. Let's just go. So all of the red stringers, we've got all of the people who were awake to COVID, the big names who were like rallying for COVID, and then all of a sudden they're starting to back Ukraine. Like, they were obvious that they were shills in the beginning, but people just didn't pay attention, and now they've come out, Ukraine, one world government, we need peace, the only way we can get peace. So that's Russell Brand, right? Is you put people in fear, you can control them. They are expert at manipulating people because they've been practicing for millennia, but they've been perfecting the art for a very long time. So one of the things I don't mention in that video, because it was in a couple of the other brainwashing videos, so up until about the 80s, there was another shift, right? So up until about the 80s, the only way that they'd really kind of figured out how they can manipulate people and get them to do what they need to do, you need to get them into the fear state. So how do we get them into the fear state? We kind of like push all this propaganda. We split the generations so people can't have conversations. We completely manipulate them. We break them by destroying their identity. You break them, so that's what I wasn't able to communicate very effectively in that video. I was like, wait a minute, I don't really make much sense what I'm talking about that. So when they're talking about why I get so frustrated with transgender is you on a biological you are XX chromosome or XY chromosome, excluding Down syndrome. They're slightly different, right? So you're XX or XY. not saying that they're not girls or boys, but I'm just saying they have an extra chromosome. So non-Down syndrome, they're still girls and boys. So again, didn't explain that very well. But I want you to think you're either an XX or you're an XY. So you're either fundamentally a girl or a boy. Like that, to tell somebody that on it, you fundamentally at a complete teeny tiny cellular level, you are wrong. You're wrong. Like that is the most, it's to your core. Every single thing about you genetically is just wrong. So wrong that the only way you can be accepted, get love, get trust, all of these things that you haven't had, is if you alter who you are on a fundamental biological level. So it's the same. It's the same for somebody who has lots of plastic surgery. Like they hate them. They hate who they are. They have to create something different so that they can look at themselves in a mirror, right? Because if you love who you are, you don't want to change you. So it's varying degrees of how much you love yourself, right? If you love who you are, you accept yourself warts and all. You know, I've got scars. just me. Like I am who I am because of my experiences, and that includes the scars. That includes how I've developed physiologically and socially, psychologically and socially, to go and change those things so that society accepts me. But society never will accept me because they create all of these in-groups, out-groups. So until the 80s, so early 1900s is when they were starting to kind of create super soldiers, right? That's what they wanted to do, create super soldiers, which is where MK Ultra came from. So how do you create, so it was Project Artichoke first, and then Project Bluebird, and then MK Ultra. MK Ultra is kind of like the perfected version of how we break people and how we control people. But at about age 30, all of that kind of programming breaks down. So very few people who go through all that programming are alive, because once their brain starts breaking down, they commit suicide. They become drug addicts and they overdose, or alcoholics and they overdose and they commit suicide because of the trauma with no end in sight, because nobody helps them properly. Purposely, nobody helps them purposely, because it's the people in control don't want them to be helped, because if they get help and they get well, then you can point fingers, right? So early 1900s is when they were practicing all this stuff. Then they started perfecting it, and then they started using it a lot. So we had all the super soldier stuff really happening. So about 100 years of kind of like building that. But so then what happened in the 80s is they started to get really good with technology. And what I mean by really good with technology is understanding how to, on a mass scale, manipulate and influence you on a cellular level, so that you have the same effects as if you break somebody psychologically. So it's the same effect. We want that mind control, right? So mind control isn't just MK Ultra, it's also using technology. So we knew, again, back late 1800s, that you could kill cancer, you could kill and reverse diseases, and you could alter your physiological state using frequencies. So you have a look at the Rife machine, that was frequencies. So we vibrate a certain frequency, and when there's an organ that's out of frequency, that's when it's diseased, it's out of ease. So all you need to do is you need to kind of get it back into the right frequency. And that's why essential oils work, is they kind of function on different frequencies. They kickstart your cells, and they get your cells doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's not magic, it just gets your cells doing what it's supposed to be doing. Yes, different emotions, different frequencies. So if you're vibrating on a frequency of less than 20, so shame and guilt, you are so 20 is kind of like shame and guilt. When you get below that to 17 and a half is you are like zombified. And so you're easily, it's just like, that's quite literally what they call the zombie state, is 17 and a half. If you are resonating at 17 and a half, is your brain, if you had critical thinking skills, they're not working. So back in the late 1800s, they knew that, but they just hadn't figured out how to utilize it in a way that it was effective at controlling people. So if we skip forward a bit, we then have HARP created, you know, and they're using it for weather, right? They're using it for weather, but actually it's not. It was created as a mass mind control device by altering the frequency, which is how you alter the weather, right? You shift the frequencies, you change. You know, if you think about water, it is liquid, solid, and gas, depending on how fast it's vibrating. So it's change the frequency, change what happens to water. We are between 55 and 62% water as adults. So men and women are slightly different. So on a, like, if you can alter water, you can, like, we think of ourselves as this solid being, but we're not. We have to kind of really think about ourselves on these teeny tiny little atomic level to understand how harmful everything is, and why we don't get taught this stuff at school, because we freaking figure it out. So by the 80s, we were starting to be given the tech, right? We started to get we started to be getting so they started introducing like telephones and radios and TVs and bigger TVs, and we started to get computers. And so where we are now is everybody has got a handheld mind control device, because all they need to do is shift the cellular signals to a different frequency, and I'm literally holding the thing that is altering my cells and shifting me in and out of the emotional state. So all it needs to do is shift me, have it on me all the time. It interferes with the way that my body is functioning and makes me easily controllable. So in the 80s is when they started the massive building of all of the telephone towers. I'm kind of under the impression, but I haven't looked into it, so it may just be my brain leaping to strange places. I'm kind of under the impression that all of the wind turbines and all of the solar panels will also be part of this frequency network of a frequency which will be able to shift us in a not so great happy place. So the Tetra system, which I mentioned on the other video, is the system which is plugged into, which our police force in the UK uses. So all of the radios that they have, all of the car radios, all of that is on this Tetra system. And that is set at 17 and a half. Okay, literally set at the zombie frequency. So when you look at all the processing videos, and you're like, well, you know, literally set at the one that makes them easily controlled. They did that in the 80s, and they made it across all of the police service, and it was set to be moved and changed, and they've extended the contract, right? Because you can't have the police thinking for themselves and not being interfered with, right? So I used to wear a Fitbit, and I knew, bearing in mind I knew all this stuff, I was like, oh, it can't be that bad. Oh, it's just, it might just be tweaking my body a little bit. I have always had very limited amounts of sleep and functioned very, very well. So, between 3 hours and 5 hours is all the sleep that I have always needed. And for the last 2.5 years, I was struggling to function. I was struggling to wake up in the morning, really, really, really ill. I couldn't figure out what was going on. Why was I so? I'm never used to be ill, right? And one day, my Fitbit ran out. And I was just like, I can't be asked to charge it because the charger's in the other room. And I just left it. And I slept 5.5 hours and I woke up and I was fine. And it was within 24 hours, my entire system had put itself back into balance. And I tested it. I was like, is that a fluke? 3 nights in a row, I had no Fitbit. And I was back to my pre-2019 self. And then I put it on for one night, and could I wake up in the morning? Had I had a good level of sleep? Just didn't work. So that's just one technology. And I don't have my phone. I have my phone on airplane mode. Right? I have it, or usually have it in here. So my bedroom's this is not my bedroom, this is the office. So I usually have it in here charging. So I don't have my phone in the room. And if it does, if it has gone in the room with me, it's set automatically to go into turning Wi-Fi off and it not attaching or getting anything between 10 at night and kind of 7 o'clock in the morning. So it turns itself off from if I've forgotten. So all of these things are designed to interfere with our brain waves. They're designed to interfere with the way that we work on a cellular level, because while they've expertly groomed the millennials and younger, they also need to be able to take control of those who grew up with understanding critical thinking. So you still need to get us in the fear state so we can be controlled. So a lot of the psyop, is for the adults. So no kids watch BBC News on 24/7. They're not watching that, but the adults are, right? The adults were taught BBC is trustworthy. So watch BBC News, whatever they're telling you is the truth, right? So then you have the adults telling the kids. And how do you make sure the kids aren't... So COVID is a really good example, actually. So how can you make sure that the children stay in fear? The only way you can make sure the kids stay in fear is by isolating them from their peer groups. Because as we went through the developmental stages, we shifted, right? So under the age of 6, 7 is the adults are the ones who gospel, whatever they say is gospel. 6 and 7 hits, and they shift to paying attention to their peer groups. So if the kids were continually going to school and recognizing that none of their classmates are ill, none of their classmates' parents are ill, thinking everybody's fine, everybody's fine. They did the same thing with the Cold War, right? So kids were drilled on duck and cover. So they had to keep the children fearful, had to keep the adults fearful, children fearful. You have to keep the threat level high so that people will continue to do as they're told while you manipulate them in the background. But coming full circle to where we started, hopefully now you can understand how those 12-year-old children happily murdered their teachers, why child soldiers are the most dangerous soldiers, right? So if you teach a child to murder before they develop morals and empathy, chances are you will delay for a very long time the development of morals and empathy, because they will do it for protection. So if I get taught a pre-veil dropping, say like whatever puberty hits, so pre-full veil, is if I was taught that, they're bad people and this is how we deal with bad people. So same as like, murder for some of you watching might seem really extreme, but if you think about a home where a child is exposed to hitting in the home, they learn hitting's okay and therefore they hit, right? So if you learn murder's okay, therefore you murder. What you don't want to happen is having a crisis of conscience. And so even if you then discover it's children only discover something's morally wrong when somebody from their peer group says it's morally wrong. So if you get all like 10 children all murdering and all only together, they then don't realize other children aren't growing up that way. Therefore, nobody's questioning. So you grow up in isolation. So child soldiers are the most dangerous because they will be the ones who have no empathy, no moral compass. So the psychopaths. These are the it tend to be politicians, not child soldiers, but politicians tend to have no empathy. They're psychopathic. Same as bankers, which is, they're risk takers. They don't care. They will do whatever they can to get on top. And they will squash anybody to get it's psychopathic, because you don't harm. If you have empathy, you won't harm another person. But so they started the whole child soldier thing in the Ukraine 2014, right? So those 7, 8, 9-year-olds are now adults. They started child soldier thing in Syria and Libya and Afghanistan and all of the places they go and conquer, right? All of the places the West go and rape and pillage and destroy their resources. And at some point, all of those children become adults. And then we open our borders and we invite them all in, right? So this is the other part of the plan, right? You create psychopaths, and then you push them into the Western society because you need people to, depopulation on all different levels. So all of these young fighting age male, it's an invasion. It is an invasion. It's a purposeful invasion, right? Now, I'm not blaming. This is different. I'm not blaming those people who are on the buses, who were in the dinghies, right? Like they were psychologically, developmentally, emotionally, and often physically destroyed by the cabal and trained in. I mean, they don't realize that, right? But they were. So so the cabal fucked them over so that they could come and fuck us over, right? This is like how do you destroy your enemy? You just it's so multifaceted. People just miss the big picture. So it's not saying it's okay to go murder, but we have to understand happy, healthy individuals who are raised correctly and with love don't murder people. So if you've seen what we've seen recently in the United Kingdom is, you can be walking down the street and all of a sudden somebody's there with a machete coming at you. Like this is not a behavior that is part of the moral fabric of the United Kingdom. That's an imported behavior from another country and another culture where that's acceptable, where it's okay. And in Pakistan, it's okay to stone a woman to death for being raped, actually, in some Muslim countries. If the woman is raped, it's okay to stone her to death. Like, so if it's culturally okay for all the men to stand around and stone a woman to death, this is okay. And then you bring them over to a culture where it's not okay, and then expect. And they're not coming because they're choosing to come because they want to enjoy England. It's different, right? So same as in America and everywhere else. So if I moved to France, I would want to integrate. I mean, I'd never want to move to France. Like, they just like roll over. I'm quite happy in England with me pitchfork, right? But if I move to the US, right, I would want to integrate with US customs because I've chosen to move there because they are doing something that I think is maybe missing in my country, and I'd really like to be a part of that. I haven't been forced there, where I still really hold to all of my cultural beliefs. I'm just in a new geographic location. So that's what's happened is people haven't come because they wanted to experience the culture. They want their culture, and they have been manipulated into a new geographical location. So again, that plays into fear. So if you now know you can walk down the street and potentially get machete to death, what are you going to do? You're going to stay away from going outside. You're going to be even more insular. So you have to separate everybody, keep up the fear, fuck with your frequency, and obviously food's fucked with, and all of those other things which enable us to heal, blah 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 blah. So it's just, we're in a constant stress state, and I mean actual physiological stress state, and therefore you just do as you're told. And then young generation weren't even taught how to think. So we don't know how to think. When we have to get taught how to think, how to understand things, how to take multiple bits of information and kind of feed it all together and create an argument, and understand the world from different people's viewpoints, and accept that it's okay that somebody else has a different belief without bloody screaming like the millennials do. So we were all taught how to think, so we have to be in fear state so that we're controllable. They were not taught how to think, so they will literally do as they are told, and they are indoctrinated. So it's important that we understand that it is reversible, right? It is reversible. People can be taught how to think. They can understand. It has to be gentle. It has to be gently, softly. Because otherwise, anybody who's maybe 30 and younger, you have to write them all off, right? So you see how dangerous that is. So we've got this group of, but we've also got this other band of who were, grew up in the 60s and 70s, where there was free love and just do what you want. So they tried it. It's the same type of parenting style, that they went free love, everybody have drugs, make peace, not war. Everybody loves each other. I mean, you only have to look at the Manson stuff to know how well that turned out. It's all done on purpose. Basically, the government gives them purpose and fulfillment. Yep. Yeah. And so it's really critical. So when you know that 13 to 19 is identity formation, right? If you destroy them, say you're not who you are, you're not, you can't be a boy because you like wearing dresses. It's got nothing to do with the fact that you you just happen to like your bits, swinging. Look at Scots, right, in wearing kilts. I mean, they don't wear no underwear. So I mean, you wouldn't say a Scottish warrior back in the day was a girl because he wore a skirt, right? You would be like, oh yeah, you're a girl because you're wearing a skirt. No, it was, if you, I'm sure it was probably because of just ease of if you need to wee and poo on a battlefield, like it's easier, right? It sounds gross, but you know, they used to just, if you gotta go, you gotta go. I wonder how many people were like murdered while taking a crap on a boat. So this is my brain goes, sorry, that statistic's not out there. And if it is, like, I mean, it's also something they would have been collecting statistics. So that's another one with a kilt around their ankles. But so, you know, by teaching somebody, you are in the wrong body because you just happened to pick up all the pink items and you're a boy, but nobody's considered the fact that maybe your eyes are slightly different, and to you it's not pink, it's blue, right? Because you're colorblind. Like, so we're making all of these assumptions about individuals. So first I tell you that you're not who you are. You strip you away from your family, so you've got no familial identity, you've got no cultural identity, particularly if you're a white British person. You're not allowed to be proud of being English, because then you're a Nazi and you're a fascist. So you've got no cultural identity. You're not allowed to be your individual. You have to like be for everybody else. So we destroy who you are, and then round about the age where you have to rebuild your self-esteem. So it's just this is why it's so. I hope you kind of like fall in love with developmental psychology, right? Because it's like everything they're doing makes sense. Like no other, and I'm going to stand here and say no other science, no other psychology, like is. You can track what they're doing with certainty, right? So you can predict you can predict the outcomes based on how somebody was trained, how somebody was looked after, like what's coming next. So by the time they're 13 to 19, they're rebuilding. They have to rebuild their self-esteem. They've got no confidence. You then attach them to a group and give them purpose, and they will fight with every fiber of their being to hold on to that identity. They will. So, you know, and you see this in schools, you know, you've got, what is it, like the different cliques, right? You've got the jocks, the skaters, and I'm probably, you know, they probably aren't called those groups anymore, but we naturally do that in that age group anyway, because we're trying to figure out where we fit in society. We need to be accepted by our peer groups. We need to understand where we are in the hierarchical structure. We need to know who we are in the world, where we fit, our importance in the world, like, and it kind of sets us up for who we then become. And the only way we can really understand who we are is by actually doing things, right? So the only reason I know I freaking love like mint choc chip ice cream from Thornton's. I don't think Thornton's exists anymore. That was like kind of my like break in silence, my little silence, because I think I just remembered that Thornton's went under, which was sad. So they used to put like Fox's mints in there. So you used to have like mint choc chip ice cream, but it used to have like Fox's mints. Do they do Fox's mints? If they've, oh my gosh. Anyway. So the only reason I know that I love that more than I love maybe Asda's ice cream is because I've had both, right? So I've tried those things and I've decided I'm a Thornton's mint choc chip girl. I'm not an Asda mint ice cream girl. I have decided that... So, let's talk about the hair difference, right? So they were very white blonde hair. So the only reason I ended up with like white, like ice white hair was because I was literally in the shop one day with my mum, and she said, I've always wondered what you look like with blonde hair, like really white hair, because it was really blonde as a child, and then you get older and it just goes this strange colour, right? I was in the shop and I went, let's go for it, right? So, but I decided very quickly, I really liked the colour, but I don't like the effort. Okay, so I've decided I'm just a natural hair colour kind of girl. because it's easier. But I only know that because I've tried it. So one of the other things we do with children is they're in school for 40 hours a week, and then they have homework. And then if they're not doing homework, they have to do after school clubs, right? So we dictate what they're doing with all of that time where they should be figuring out who they are. Am I a mint chocolate person? Am I somebody who likes thick socks, thin socks? Am I somebody who likes to wear kilts? Am I somebody who likes to go commando? Like, I can only do all those things if I have an opportunity to try those things. And we try them when we're kids, when we're fearless. Then we have to retry them again when we're a teenager. And the problem with teenagers, I mean, there's lots of problems with teenagers, but the real big problem with teenagers is because of the synaptic pruning. So when their brain's like just going, oh, you don't need any of this shit, let's get rid of it all. And they're going through that huge developmental stages, and they've got like hormones going all over the places. They need like between 12 and 16 hours sleep. Like the science says, the real science says they need between 12 and 16 hours sleep in order to kind of like combat all of the physiological changes that are going on in the body. So what do? We shove them in a classroom, we dictate to them, you don't give them an opportunity to figure out who they are, and they're just exhausted all the time, right? So they're useless. You know, teenagers will grunt at you because they're barely functioning. And so when I work with parents, so my young people are like, is that 13 to 19 age group, right? And then we've got kids underneath. So the young people, if I'm working with young people, one of the things that I tell the parents is you've got to remember when you were pregnant, right? If the mum's there, remember when you were pregnant. If the dad's there, remember when she was pregnant, right? I mean, she was freaking insane for 9 months, potentially not even all 9 months, but there was times where, you know, you were watching TV and it was like a comedy, and then all of a sudden she's freaking crying for no reason, right? That's hormones. And that only lasts like 9-10 months. Puberty lasts at least 6 years. So you imagine being pregnant for 6 years and that uncertainty of like the hormone rushes or not knowing whether you're coming or going. And then also imagine that pregnancy period where you are not in control of any of your choices, right? So because teenagers don't have control over where they live, what they eat, what they learn, what they do, like that is completely stripped from them. At the time where they need it to understand who they are, they're not allowed to make those decisions. They're dictated to pre-puberty what the world looks like from a very warped standpoint in the classroom, and then they are forced to create an identity which again is designed in the classroom. And most teachers, very, very left, very, very left. Is very few teachers who are right-leaning. So they're going to be taught from a warped perceptual standpoint. And when you then take into account a lot of the teachers are, they go education, teaching with no life experience, no real understanding of the world. And a lot of them are under 30. You have the brainwashed generation teaching the new generation. The only way to describe it is like it's a clusterfuck. Right, is what we're facing right now with the under 30s. And so I'm 38. My youngest sister, there's only 4 years between us. And the way that we see the world is very different. Very different. And so the gradual shifts happened between my older sister's education and my younger sister's. So 6 years. It shifted dramatically in those 6 years. So hopefully you guys have found that helpful and useful. So I didn't realise I made it in October 2020. So all of that got scrubbed from YouTube. So it is available on my Muse channel, but as for those of you who watched it, they didn't like me playing it, because it doesn't normally skip, and you watch that over there. But that was after, so I streamed Shadowgate, and that put me on the radar. And so I was banned for many weeks after streaming Shadowgate. And then when they allowed me to come back online, within 24 hours of saying your account's been activated, I got pinged for that video, that Woke Legacy video. That was the one that they pinged for misinformation and for offensive. It was offensive because I spoke about transgenders, I'm assuming, because they don't tell you what's offensive. So that got done, and then they did the other brainwashing videos in succession, and then they shut the channel down. Yeah, so that's what went first. So I thought it's quite good to kind of go back around again for the people who've kind of joined afterwards. So sometimes recaps are good. So thank you very much, my lovelies. Have yourselves a beautiful rest of your evening. And I shall see you next Wednesday. So I'm still only doing single shows at the moment because I'm working crazy busy at the weekends, so I can do other work during the week. So have an amazing week. Yes, I was about to say weekend. Then have an amazing week, and I shall see you next Wednesday. Mwah. Bye for now.